I can tell by the sound of your voice that it's going to be revelatory from the start. If there's any initiative in the neighborhood, or even what he thinks about the idea of the university instead of what's proposed by Williamsburg. Even though Williamsburg is kind of unclear about some things, strategically so, by the way, not defectively so. But strategically so, he's unclear about who he's going to rent to. You know, when I spoke to him once, you know, one of those kind of rock star presentation at the Woods, Brian Paul was there.
Early in the process.
Right.
That was very early in the process.
Where there was a lot of applause for him and a lot of adulation, a lot of awestruckness.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that was the one that NAG organized.
And we've come a very, very long way since that very date in the Woods. Before you say anything, Christine, I want to point something out very interesting. I wonder if either of you have read Ward Dennis's post about a New York Times article making reference to South Williamsburg, which he took issue with.
Oh, yeah.
Because they didn't call it Southside?
Exactly.
Yeah, I read that one. And he was right.
Yeah, he is right. I'm just saying it's interesting. Ward is writing that, which is very different from Ward 3 years ago, 4 years ago maybe. Ryan, I hear, not working for NAG anymore. Lacey Tauber is now legislative director for
our new Councilman, Antonio Renosos.
That's correct.
Yep.
It's a very interesting destiny that all of these people share from NAG.
Non-profits and political kind of life attract young, idealist people.
We were just talking about things we should talk about with Stephen Levin.
His agenda for the next 4 years. Yeah,
that's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, his vision kind of for the neighborhood, and then kind of what the pieces on how does he see that being manifest, and like what are the big issues and concerns that he thinks, you know.
There are plenty of issues in the.
Are you going to talk about his 4-year agenda?
No, I'll let him.
No, please, he's not here. Tell us about his 4-year agenda. We're very interested.
Well, how did you end up working for Steve? Take a little pressure off you.
So I've only actually lived in New York for a year.
Oh, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I worked in politics in Seattle, where I'm from, and went to grad school, and then came here and was lucky enough to do the job with Steve, and it's been really great.
Did the councilman at any time warn you about us? Did he give you any kind of warning or say?
No, I'm sure it was Rami.
Rami, sure.
About you?
No, about me. About any of us.
About this cabal.
No.
Cabal. How I wish.
Should I be nervous about you?
Oh yeah, you absolutely should be nervous. But it would be great, because if you're nervous, then you'll say things that are honest. And you'll blurt them out, and that's what we look for. Because that's what is it? Palin says, gotcha journalism.
Okay, that's what you're about.
That's what we're going to do with the councilman today. The entire episode is going to be us trying to maneuver with him. Because I, for one, recognize his intelligence, his sophistication, especially at the debate. I thought he performed very well.
Oh, during the campaign?
Right. I'm interested in knowing why Councilman Levin would even be interested in what someone like myself cares about, because I'm an anarchist. I don't care about the political system. I just want to stir shit up, you know, and I invite Meredith and Christine because I see things going on in the neighborhood. We see things going on in the neighborhood. We don't like them, but we don't want to be, I don't want to be political. Fortunately, sometimes we have to, you know, we have to get together in situations such as these, even though they're not the settings. I wouldn't want to get to know Stephen Levin as a politician. I would rather get to know him as a person.
Oh yeah.
Because he strikes me as a really good guy. Politically, ideologically, I'm like very far to the left of the councilman, I guess. But who knows what he's really thinking.
Well, you live in the district?
Oh yeah.
So you're so you're a constituent, and whether you're an anarchist or you're a extreme Republican or whoever.
I'm a misarchist is more like it, you know.
And here he is!
Hello.
Councilman.
Hi.
Welcome to the Bittersweet Brooklyn studio.
I like it. This is great.
Christine was doing the seating and she decided you were gonna get that chair.
All right.
And we also have cookies.
Councilman, we
Yeah.
were just talking about you. So this is the 10th episode of Bittersweet Brooklyn. We want to welcome our audience.
Thank you for having me, by the way.
Thank you for coming.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you coming. You've been mentioned in every single one of our episodes. Right? You are the most popular item in all of our long list of...
I thought that there was an episode or two that I wasn't mentioned.
No, that's impossible.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think we did bring up that we didn't bring you up, though. So
Okay, all right, that counts. Yeah.
That counts. Because then your spirit was hovering.
Yes. No, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. And sorry it took me so long to get over here.
You're waiting for the 10th episode, so.
I was waiting for the 10th episode.
The all-important 10th episode. We spoke about you at length last episode, right after when we had Stephen Pearson. And we spoke at length about your presentation at the debate. Because we were also comparing it to a Brooklyn paper article that was written, Steve versus Steve.
Yes.
Right. Which
Yes,
we
I
thought was
remember that.
preposterous. We all agreed, whether or not we supported you, we all agreed the article was unfair to you. Because we thought you did very well at the debate. I'm sorry if I'm speaking for you, Meredith or Christine. I thought you did very well at the debate and thought the coverage was kind of silly, actually.
I mean, I appreciate. I thought the coverage was a little strange because I don't think it quite represented that debate. But I thought that yeah, I mean that happens from time to time with you know various press outlets where they were going with a boxing metaphor. I think was like the gist of the article. So they really had to take that metaphor. Several, you know, the article wouldn't have worked. I don't think if the metaphor was broken. So they had to say that I was on the ropes because you know if they said that we were in the middle of the ring or something, we could have circled for a. I mean, I don't know, you know.
isn't that sort of a constant theme, though, that we see in local media, sort of creating controversy that might not necessarily be there, or maybe we're just seeing the polar extremes in the controversy. We're not covering any of the middle ground, which is pretty vast and represents a vast number of people. I think, in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, you see that a lot locally, but then you see it kind of citywide and nationally. Obviously,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and I don't want to delve too far into the latest controversy, you know, that the mayor is facing over this security detail going 10 miles over the speed limit. I was at a thing yesterday with the mayor about Long Island College Hospital, so there was a very good resolution to the Long Island College Hospital situation lawsuit that was been going on for a year, and about as good as anyone could have hoped. And community groups were on board, you know, all the unions that were plaintiffs in the lawsuit were on board. So it was a very good resolution, and the mayor has been very involved in the issue for a long time. And then like all the reporters, like they didn't want to hear anything about. I mean, not all of them, but a good number of the reporters just wanted to like pounce on him about this issue of whether his security detail was, you know, going 10 miles over the speed limit. Meanwhile, like the police commissioner had already kind of addressed the issue, and it's a police issue because the security detail is part of the police department, Post or the Daily News. That's all they really wanted to like talk about because that's the controversy.
Well, that sells the papers, that gets the
Those distractions
clicks and that.
are reduced demand.
And I'm not sure if it's still the case, but I think the Brooklyn paper is actually owned by News Corp.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It owns CNG, and CNG owns.
I mean, Judy McGuire she made this explanation also in one of our, I think the 3rd or the 4th episode, that this kind of nonsense sells papers. Does it really sell papers? I don't know.
I never quite understood the business model of the free paper. There's, Brooklyn Paper is a free paper, as is, the Courier. They're kind of the same thing. But then, I mean, I guess it has to do with advertising sales.
Okay.
I come up with the advertising rate by how many people read your paper.
Right.
Sure.
So-
But what I mean to argue is this what people are really interested in? Are people really so salacious that they're much more interested in de Blasio going 10 miles above the speed limit wherever it was than the closing of this hospital, which is infinitely more important? I mean, infinitely more important.
Well, so there are there's been coverage, kind of these like Capital New York is this new blog that's kind of modeled on Politico, or it's affiliated. It's part of Politico. It's affiliated with Politico, and like Politicker, which is the New York Observer blog. They're focused on the Long Island College Hospital story, and I think that down there certainly in that part of the district I represent, in Brooklyn Heights and in Boerum Hill, downtown Brooklyn, yeah, they're like totally into this issue. And actually, there's some really good local reporters, but some of the best coverage of Long Island College Hospital has been a woman named Mary Frost from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. And then the Red Hook Star and Review.
Yeah, George,
yeah.
The Brooklyn Heights blog.
Brooklyn Heights blog.
They're very tuned in to the issues that are affecting the community.
And there's actually, and then even Capital had their reporter was getting some really very good scoops, because he was in the courtroom and was overhearing stuff. I mean, he was getting some juicy stuff. So I mean, I think that there's there's good stories out there without having to make stuff up. That's the way I look.
Yeah, when I read Brooklyn Paper, we've spoken about this in previous episodes, that reading is wow, it's worse than the New York Post. I don't even know how to put it, because I don't really want to disrespect journalists. I have respect for the profession. I admire anyone who writes and gets published, because I think it's challenging to put your stuff out there for other people to read, who often have knives for eyes. When they're reading stuff on the internet and they're responding, they're really callous and inhumane. And a lot of the issues that we talk about, like the hospital, and even for me, issues like gentrification in Williamsburg, some of the worst stuff imaginable you could read is spoken about or written about here in our neighborhood or in your district. I mean, do you think it's a problem? I mean, I think it's a problem. I think Brooklyn Paper is a problem. I don't mean in the sense that we should get a bunch of people together and storm the offices kind of stuff. I don't mean like that. I mean that when I want to be depressed, I just log on to brooklynpaper.com when I feel like I want to, tear myself down or something. Oh, I'm feeling good today. Let me go and fuck myself up.
I think that's good. The issue you're going to run into when you look at any blog or paper where commenters don't have to register and log in, though. When you can comment anonymously, you're going to get the worst of the worst chiming in. What I feel like is where Brooklyn Paper is missing it is if they would actually follow through some of those comments and update stories based upon the questions that arise. Not the hyperbole, I'm gonna beat your ass stuff and all that silliness. But there's some legitimate questions come up sometimes if you can make it through all the drivel. And I would like to see the writers, maybe, follow up and update on some of these. Sometimes we get kind of bombarded with a lot of information right when it's happening, but then a couple weeks down the line, it's so what's going on now? What's I don't know anything that's going on with the Swing and 60 Senior Center. I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to know about the tenants that their pipes were all ripped out of their building a few weeks ago. We never get the follow through. It's just this whack in the face of often depressing, kind of news. And then it's and then what? And then what's happened? And I guess one of the things, I'm jumping ahead maybe to what I wanted to ask you about here somewhat pointedly, is to not pointedly necessarily, but you might know the answer to this, is I feel like we're really disengaged from having an active plan to work on retention in the neighborhood right now, outside of perhaps El Puente and St. Nick's. But I know it's sometimes through the history of the neighborhood, there's been funds set aside to work on anti-harassment, anti-displacement issues. And I don't get a sense that anything is happening on the community board level. And there's been talk of community boards in the media recently about reform and change and making the community boards stronger voices. And, you know, what would be your suggestion on how to, you know, get something going in the community board level to work on retention?
Well, first on the anti-harassment stuff, which has been a good resource, a good allocation of city resources. So going back to 2005, one of the things that was created as a result of the rezoning, which has obviously created so many problems, intended and unintended, is that they set aside some funding for the tenant harassment fund, and they created kind of a scope area. And that funding eventually ran out. It's a kind of a long, complicated thing about how and I know this because going back through the points of agreement from 2005, when we just did this, we went through this rezoning, or the rezoning at 77 Commercial Street just a couple of months ago. The 2005 points of agreement put money from the sale of the air rights of 65 Commercial Street, the MTA lot, into the tenant displacement fund. But since that wasn't, that didn't happen till now, that money was put up front by the city to eventually get backfilled. Anyway, that's an aside, but it was, the city originally allocated $2 million, which then got spent. So after it was exhausted over the course of like 5 or 6 years, we've essentially had to go around and try to cobble that money together. And the anti-displacement fund goes towards community organizations that are doing legal services, keeping people in their homes. I mean, I think the most dangerous thing out there is the destabilization of the current housing stock. You know, I mean, that's the thing that I think is where gentrification has the most negative impact, is when a regular apartment that somebody's been living in for 25 years, you know, either is destabilized, or a new owner buys it and they kick everybody out, and there's no legal protection. So, but I think that having community organizations that are on the ground, keeping track of everybody, providing legal services is a very important part of that. And so what we've kind of been forced to do is, in each rezoning or through the budget process, try to get some money back in, some money back in. The structure of the collaborative or the anti-displacement fund is a good structure. The structure works. The community organizations that do it do a good job. The question is, how do we get like a dedicated funding stream that doesn't have to, we don't have to go like use every rezoning to go replenish that. So like part of the 77 Commercial Street and Greenpoint Landing is we got the city to agree to put more back into that fund. So now there's another $500,000 in that fund. Well, that'll only last a few years. So then we got like, you know, do you look at Domino and use it, you know, make sure that there's funding that comes out of the Domino project, and then, but is that really a good model? I mean, I don't think so.
I think we have some really big gaps though that are occurring just within the information base within the neighborhood alone. I mean, to cite an example, on the other side of this wall is an apartment that was vacated last year. The previous tenant paid $1,200 for it. It's now listed for $2,800. Right. The person that's listing it is a community board member, recently appointed to our community board, who, I mean, that's a problem, I think, within the community. If landlords are helping real estate to play their little games, it's like it's not our fault that this guy overpaid for this building. You know, that he paid, you know, $1.5 million and he wants his money back fast. Well, he bought a rent stabilized building. But
was it rent stabilized before?
The whole building is rent stabilized. They're all rent stabilized, but they're being rented out as free market apartments.
You know, that's it. So that's another thing that I think why something like funding for the collaborative or the anti-displacement, so that should be illegal. So if it's a rent stabilized apartment, unless it's gone through the destabilization process, which is when it gets to a certain price point.
After $300, it becomes a free market apartment, right? After $3,000, it's a free market.
I don't know
No.
if it's 3,000 or if
think
it's like
it's
2,600 or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember where
and it's
the.
also about income. If somebody was living in a rent stabilized and was making a certain amount, then it moves out, it can move out.
For the benefit of the listener, can we clarify exactly what we're talking about? You know, like when you're saying that there has to be a certain amount of rent reached for it to become free market?
It's a term called that we normally refer to as vacancy decontrol or luxury decontrol, which is essentially a loophole in the state rent stabilization law, which says that, and this has been part of the law going back to the 70s, where when a rent stabilized apartment reaches, and if anyone lives in a rent stabilized apartment, you know that your rent will go up 3% a year or 6% every 2 years. You have all types of legal protections. If you're in a rent stabilized apartment, you can't just be evicted. They can't just raise your rent precipitously. Our rent stabilization laws are generally all right. I mean, they keep people in their apartments, they keep the rents stabilized.
If the person knows they're living in a rent stabilized building,
Right.
which would be my point of
Well,
why
they
I
haven't
would
reached
want.
this point of free market
There's
blast off.
there's like essentially a free market blast off. So we've housing advocates fight for every year at the state assembly and state senate, maybe not every year, but every few years, is to increase that limit, the destabilization limit, so that like it used to be 2,000. I think it's been raised to somewhere in the 2,500 range or 2,600 range, and then it's and I mean ideally it's 3,000 or above, so that you can't, yeah, essentially once you're out of the system, you know, it's totally free market.
You're talking about a radically decreasing pool, radically shrinking pool in Williamsburg, right?
Absolutely.
Or in Brooklyn.
And this is essentially like ground zero for destabilization. I mean, other places like the East Village, obviously, where there's other ways that landlords get around it. So you do like major capital improvements, but then you can do a pass along of like 1/40th. And I can't remember exactly where the laws are at the moment because they've been changed over a couple of years. And so the deal on this is that it's all actually about the state senate. The state senate for 2 years, a couple of years ago, was Democratic controlled, and then there's all types of just horrible, the worst that elective government has to offer. It's like all types of corruption and different groups like forming a separate group, so that they call themselves the Amigos, and they were like it was Pedro Espada and Carl Kruger, and it was
in the Bronx. Right?
In the Bronx and in Brooklyn, and they kind of took it over and were like this, like a middle group. Now you have this IDC, but it's in a Republican. Right now, the Republicans have control of the state senate, and then you have an independent Democratic conference. But when the Republicans control the state senate, you can't get good rent laws. It's been that way for many years. That's when Joe Bruno controlled the state senate, you can never really get good rent laws, and they control it because no matter what the assembly says about it, which is a Democratic body, or the governor, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, state senate has to sign off on it. So when we got a Democratic state senate for 2 years, there was a number of rent laws that did get updated, but I don't think they were able to get everything. And then it flipped back to the Republicans, and now it's Republican again. So that's kind of that's from a legislative perspective. that's where it all comes together. And it goes back to the 70s when the state took over rent stabilization law from the city. It was called the Ertstat law. That was in the early 70s. And so one thing that we always fight for is a repeal of the Ertstat law, because if we repeal the Ertstat law, we get to then decide what our rent laws are in this, from a local level. So the city council would be able to do it. However, we require the state senate to sign off on the repeal of the Ertstat law, and since that would decrease their power, and the state assembly, but it would decrease their ability to control the law, they're never going to sign off on it. Like, why would they sign? I mean, I don't want to say they're never going to sign off on it, but their incentive is to not sign off on the Ertstat provision, repealing the Ertstat.
To me, what feels more broken, though, than the legislative end of it is actually the enforcement end of it. And people not knowing what their rights are, not knowing that they even live in a rent-stabilized building.
Absolutely.
And that's where I think the urgency is, and I think that's where the most immediate need for improvement, and that there are steps that we could do on a community level that might not necessarily mean insane amounts of money, but they do need the manpowers behind it. And we might need to approach it on a whole different local level to let people know, like, you've got some rights and we need to defend this stuff before it all just disappears, you know, one building at a time.
I mean, that's something that, I mean, we might be able to do our part on, in terms of our communication. So I send out a newsletter every few months that goes to the entire district. So I mean, that's certainly something that we can put in our newsletter, just kind of, and it's not like an email-based newsletter. It's like it goes to every home. It says, you know, do you live in a rent-stabilized apartment? Here's how you find out. The laws on it are a little bit tricky as well, because unless you're the actual tenant, you can't. The laws make it so for privacy you can't actually go and find out which units are rent stabilized and which ones aren't. But
we do know the buildings that are on the list. We do
buildings
know
that
the
are on the
addresses
list,
of
right?
buildings.
And it's pretty easy to, if a building has 6 units or more, it's probably on the list. So that's the cutoff. Is if you're in a 5-unit or less building, you're not rent stabilized. 6 or more, and you ought to be, unless it's been destabilized for some reason. The State Department of Housing and Community Renewal, or DHCR, is the agency that is there to enforce rent stabilization.
And they will tell you over the phone if you are or not. You know, you don't have to show. You just have to show up with a phone bill and a power bill and this and that. They'll actually look it up for you over the phone now, which is fantastic.
And one thing though that I've encountered that's really scary is the non-rent stabilized buildings. So in Greenpoint and Williamsburg, we have a lot of smaller buildings, the 3, 4, 5-unit buildings, and I've talked to several senior citizens who live in these smaller non-rent stabilized buildings who have, you know, the previous owner will have passed away and left it to a niece or a nephew or a son or a daughter, and then that person wants to either flip the building or rent it out at market rate. And senior citizens who are living on Social Security and pension or just Social Security that are paying like not cheap rents, but like, you know, $800, $900, $1,000 a month, you know, are all of a sudden getting like 100% increases, like $2,000, and they have to leave. And it's actually like terrible. And yeah, I mean, it's happened a couple of times where, you know, if you go to the senior centers in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, you'll like people are facing that exact situation. And that's something that I don't even, the only thing I could think of to really change that on a broad level is to like make rent stabilization apply to smaller buildings. But that would be,
which is not going to happen. I mean,
if eventually the Democrats could actually take over the state Senate and keep it, then I think that there are opportunities there. You know, they have a pretty strong lobby. The Rent Stabilization Association is a fairly active and strong lobbying group.
I'm gonna kill a
Wow.
fly in front of
Sure. Give it.
Councilman
my goodness.
Levin. It's gigantic, isn't it?
Oh,
Oh, nicely done. He sent it through the wall.
One swat.
It's amazing. Have a fly swatter.
Just want to let you know what your constituents are all about.
It's an issue. It's a thing.
Wow.
Councilman, on a related note,
Yes.
and it's something that we talk about in many different episodes also, is what's going on at the former Domino Sugar site.
Yes.
Every single time I've seen you in public, it's always been about Domino Sugar.
I think that's how I first met you.
Correct.
I'm
Right.
sure of it, yeah.
Right.
You know, it's a little bit of like deja vu all
Sure,
over again
sure,
right now
sure.
about Domino.
So it's about time that we actually sat down and talked about it.
Right now we are, just to give you a snapshot of where things are in the process right now, Domino, like all other proposed rezoning projects, is going through the ULURP process.
Right.
The ULURP process is the city's rezoning process, the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure. And first step is that it's a project is certified by the Department of City Planning, then goes to the Community Board for their input, then goes to the Borough President for his or her input, and then goes to the City Planning Commission for their input, and then goes to the City Council for their input. 2 steps along that process, the City Planning Commission and the City Council, their votes are binding. So they're not, the Borough President and Community Board have advisory votes and opinions, which if you look at like the Borough President's report, it's a lengthy report. He's actually got a guy named Richard Barrick who does all of these. He's been doing it for many years. He's one of the more knowledgeable zoning people in our borough. And then at the beginning of the process, the project doesn't even get off the ground unless it's certified by the Department of City Planning. So right now we are, the city planning hearing, so that second to last step has happened, and the City Planning Commission is set to vote in the next 2 weeks on the proposal, and then it goes to the City Council, and there's going to be 45 days there or something like that. As many of your listeners know, the original Domino rezoning happened in 2010. If you go back and you read some of the articles back from 2005, when the rest of Greenpoint Williamsburg was rezoned along the waterfront, they said that Domino, it was actually really interesting because if you go back and you look at it, sometimes the city said that they had no intention of ever rezoning it, but if you look at some of the documents, the EIS and stuff like that, it was certainly considered. But it was left out. So when CPC came and went to rezone it, they did rezone it in 2010, there was, it rezoned to a density above what the rest of Greenpoint Williamsburg got. It was very supported by the administration, the Bloomberg administration. It had the support of the Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn. It had support of a lot of local groups. I was unenthusiastic about it and never liked it, and eventually couldn't stop it. That it was kind of, I kind of wish that I could have, and
Because you thought it was too big and too much and too everything, or
I didn't have the votes to stop it.
no? What did you not like about it?
Oh, I didn't like really much of anything.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that it was, yeah, I thought it was too big. I mean, just the actual density, kind of get into the weeds a little bit, but density is that it's a 5.6 FAR on a project of 11 acres. It's like, you know, a lot of residential square footage. And, you know, this is a former manufacturing site that employed thousands of people. And they were going to turn it over into a big, you know, huge luxury development with a quote-unquote 30% affordable housing component. And I know that a lot has been made of the 660 units, both then and now. They said 30% then, and that was, if you go back to the MOU, it said 30%. I mean, the MOU is not a legally non-binding document, but if you go back and look at it, it says 660 units, comma, 30% of 2,200 units. So it was one of those situations where I've gone back and I've thought a lot about it. And I was in office for 6 months at the time, and I probably would have done things differently. But at the same time, I'm not sure I would have. I'm not sure I would have ever been able to stop it, because the way that we would have needed a majority of votes to turn it down. Even though I was the local council member, it would have been very difficult to do with the amount of support that it had from the administration. The amount of, I think that it had a lot of support from other council members and from the Speaker's office. And one frustrating thing, just looking back at it, is that this whole 30% stuff was like the reason. It was everybody, it was like people were saying it a lot, like this is going to, this is all the affordable housing. And if you remember, it got a lot of community support over that issue. And then when CPC a year later sold it, then it's like, oh yeah, but that it wasn't really binding. So yeah, big frustration, and so right now, so what does that mean for right now? Two Trees purchased it. CPC went close to belly up. They went, they almost became bankrupt, and this was their biggest asset, and they unloaded it at I don't know, probably a little bit more than they purchased it for, but I don't know if they ever really made a profit on it, because I think they sold it for $180 million.
And they're still reeling from the coverage that the New York Times gave them.
Absolutely.
Focusing on the compromise of their mission. Whatever that mission really is.
Well, oddly enough, ironically, their mission is what we were just talking about, which is preservation. So CPC, Community Preservation Corporation, what they originally were doing going back to the 70s as a not-for-profit was preserving low-income, moderate-income neighborhoods by doing repairs to huge swaths of rent-stabilized housing, and that's actually where they got their name. Where they went off track, and anyone can read the New York Times article from a couple of years ago about it, was they spun off a for-profit wing called CPC Resources, CPCR, and that's actually was the developer that applied for the downtown rezoning in 2010. It was not CPC, it was CPCR.
And CPCR can be said to be a creature of gentrification, because it's entirely its focus. It focused on depressed communities, whatever that means, with the intention of maximizing profit, with the realization of gentrification. Once gentrification would happen, then there would be these immense profits, which is actually a sound, if you're a business person, it's a sound financial philosophy. If you're concerned about ethics, though, you have to wonder, how is it that CPC was able, these noble origins and these noble intentions, why then did they siphon off into this?
Because they were not satisfied with being a not-for-profit. And they wanted to generate more profits. I mean, I guess
the promise of real estate.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the 90s and in the early part of the 2000s, real estate. There was a lot of real estate here in New York and in Brooklyn and in parts of the Bronx, or down in the Rockaways where they were. Land was, in the 90s, it was still kind of an open.
Depressed, or whatever that meant. There's so many multiple labels that are given to these communities, and that's why it's frustrating at times, because this is often, is it real or is it a linguistic issue? You know, because these communities, how they are identified, they're much more like, you know, it's literary. It's not for real. It's not how people have really genuinely lived their lives. I myself, when I read references to Williamsburg as a blighted community, I'm baffled because I'm like, wait a minute, that's not the life that I had. I didn't have a life like this. I don't understand these reports. Maybe it's self-centered, but
I mean, I think that a lot of that language was created by real estate forces to be able to maximize it. They clearly took the long view, right? And they saw the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Well, Councilman, given the long view, do you regret your vote?
Yeah, I mean, I regret that I've gone back and I've tried to think of like what I could have done differently. I regret that that I wasn't able to actually stop it, and that I wasn't able to stop it maybe earlier on in the process. By the time I got to the council, it would have been, I still think it would have been very difficult to actually stop it at the council. I think it would have been, I don't want to say impossible because I don't know if anything's impossible, but it would have been extremely improbable to stop it at the council because I would have needed a majority vote. And part of the thing was, it goes back to these narratives created, and by them saying 30%, right? And basically saying 30% guaranteed. And from, you know, unless I was able to really go around and say, well, look, but that's not guaranteed, you know, and try to convince people otherwise, there was a certain amount of, well, how could you vote against a project with 30%, a private project with 30% affordable housing? So there's a point where, like, yes, I kind of regret the whole thing, and there's a bit of hindsight as 2020, and a bit of like, I felt like I had the right gut instinct at the time, but in the actual vote, I mean, I think that we were able to get minor things along the edges that, had I voted no, probably wouldn't have happened. But the whole thing is, I really wish that I had, you know, a couple more months on the council to kind of know the process a little bit better. At the time, it was.
I, for one, believe you. I mean, there are a lot of conspiracy theories. There are a lot of conspiracy theorists in North Brooklyn, let me tell you. And there are a lot of conspiracy theories about why you voted for the project. I, for one, disagree with you. I believe you that you voted with your heart. I don't think that there's any reason to disbelieve you. I've heard a lot of the stuff. I don't find a lot of the accounts really believable. The reason why I disagree with you, though, is that I think you fail to see the value of the symbolic import of your vote. That if you voted against, it would have been a precedence for people in the neighborhood who need that. I think it's courageous of you to come here behind the microphone to say that you do regret your decision. I think that's tremendous courage on your part, because it's such a significant vote. The upcoming vote is going to be even more significant, and is going to define not just the history of the area, but the geography, the landscape, the way everything looks, our entire experience for the next 50, 75 years, really. I hope that you consider how much you've grown since that time. And I've said this in the last episode too, that I thought you've grown a lot from the debate to the very first time I saw you when you said you were in office only 6 months. And I also thought you were a little green. I had the feeling that you struck me as being 6 months in office, and you don't strike me as being 6 months in office now. So I hope you vote against.
But the issue now, the issue coming forward as it is now is, and I think there's a couple of things going on right now that I don't know what the City Planning Commission is going to do in the next couple of weeks, because we have a new City Planning Commission. It's also in the the 2 trees proposed rezoning is crossing over from, started in Bloomberg, crossing over to de Blasio, and so I don't know what what they're going to have to say about it. And then there is this issue of it's already rezoned. So what Two Trees is looking to do is not like CPC rezone from manufacturing to residential. They're looking to rezone from residential to generally a different configuration of the residential with some commercial. So it's a pretty kind of like, the way that I'm looking at it is you have your like pros and cons. Like what would be better about this than the previously approved version? And then what would be worse about it? And then how do, you know, is that margin positive or negative? That would be the first thing. And then is that worth doing a rezoning? So the first thing is they're asking for dramatically taller buildings. So they want to take the density that already exists and build it up. They want to create a smaller footprint in the buildings, basically, but because if you go back and you look at the CPC renderings, it's like it almost looks, you know, it's like a massive footprint. It's just a lot of buildings, smaller, squatter, but a lot of buildings. So they want to build taller buildings. Okay, they originally said that it was going to be 2 acres more open space. That's now come down to it's 1.1 acres additional open space because part of that is some streets. Part of it is sidewalks. Part of it, they put in a letter that's my fault because I said that they needed to bring back before it was certified that they needed to. They said they wanted 60-story buildings. They wanted a 600-foot building, which the rest of Greenpoint Williamsburg is 40 stories, 400 feet. So they wanted to go a third higher.
Why? Strictly because of profit? I hear Willentis a lot rationalizing the increase in height as that they have to do it, not because of matter of maximizing profit, but to minimize losses. That's the way they frame their arguments always is, we've got to build taller because if we don't build taller, we're going to lose money. That's always the argument that's put forward. We've got to do it this way. If we don't do it this way, we're going to lose money. But I mean, it seems kind of preposterous to me. Why would you get involved in such a project that seems to be failure at every single turn? No, of course not. What they're doing is they want to maximize profits, and
right, but they can't say that. They can't say that's what it's. We have to. We'll lose money if you don't let us do this, and then we can't do the affordable housing, and then we can't do the green space, and then we can't. You have to give this to us.
So we can take a step back there. This whole green space thing. One other thing that we've noticed is that they're. You know, most of their open space is not green at all. It's actually hardscape. So it looks, you know, it's designed by a company called Field Ops, and they designed the High Line, and it's much more resembles the High Line than say like the transmitter park or something. You know, it's not like an overwhelming amount of open active space like I mean like green active space, so like little soccer fields or baseball fields. Really, I think there's like a volleyball court and some bocce, and that's the active. At least that's what the proposal says. And then yeah, so we sent a letter last week to the City Planning Commission about the amount of open space, additional open space, and what we think is the quality. I mean, I think open space, park space, if you want to call it a park, should be green, right? I mean, it's pretty. You know, we're a block away from McCarran Park. McCarran Park is a green park.
Most of the time.
Except for like the on the soccer field, the rubber bits that
The cancer carpet.
But that's another subject I think for another time. I mean, I desperately want that replaced.
So there's also though a big difference too in the amount of commercial space in the new one.
Right.
What are your feelings about
That's
that?
a positive. I mean, so if you're going to go on the pros and cons chart. More open space, I mean, more commercial space is a positive thing. I think that commercial space enlivens an area, like it has, if it keeps, you know, if there's it's this kind of go back to like Jane Jacobs, like, you know, keep an area active during the daytime. It's not just like a community starting at 6 p.m. when everyone gets home from work, but you know, people are there during the day. It doesn't create the same type of transportation impact because people are going the opposite direction, so they're not like all getting on the Bedford L going in the same direction at the same time, so people are actually coming in the opposite direction.
But doesn't all that office space though offset that though? We've got, they're saying office space for, was it 2,000 people?
But they're gonna all, according to the presentations that I've seen, they're all gonna walk
No.
or
Yeah,
bike.
they're gonna live in the neighborhood, but I know what the rents are. I know what the rents are, and I know what Vice pays their employees. So they don't live in this neighborhood. And
I mean,
they're not gonna be able to afford to live in this neighborhood much longer. I think the types of jobs
well,
that might be in there, I think
so
that's...
if you use the comparable, they always use the comparable of Dumbo's. Like Dumbo's commercial space is a lot of tech companies, a lot of kind of like new economy companies, which present a set of problems in that they often require at least a bachelor's degree for a lot of those jobs. So they're not like necessarily going to be jobs for people that don't have a high school education or have a GED, and so that's a big problem in and of itself. And I don't know if they're, I mean, as of now, they don't plan on creating space that is adaptable for light manufacturing, a la GMDC, and that kind of has an ability to be a little bit more flexible. It's not just tech space, you know, it's not just like a green desk or something like that. Dumbo, people that work in Dumbo, a lot more people that work in Dumbo live in CV1 than anywhere else. So we do have a lot of need, I think, for commercial space in the area. I mean, definitely, like, and even that type of, I mean, I think we have a need for all types of it. Now, that is, the market is coming around to that idea anyway. They're proposing this commercial space. I mean, I've heard, how many times have you heard Jed Williamsburg say that he's not a philanthropist? He's not. So
he's never been dishonest about his motives. I don't think he's. I mean, people can disagree with him about his vision,
right,
and that's where there's room for disagreement. But I myself have never. He's never struck me as being dishonest about what he wants.
When he said he's not a philanthropist, I mean, that's definitely true. So if he's proposing 600,000 square feet of commercial space, it's not a philanthropist move, right? He's doing it because there is a demand for that commercial space, and other developers know that as well. And I think that we're going to see over the next 10 years more commercial development than we've seen in the last 10 years, because 10 years ago everyone thought all jobs are leaving Brooklyn and it's going to be a bedroom community, and that just didn't, it was historically wrong. So I think you're going to see more of that. But my point in saying that is that it's on the ledger of like pro and con, that's a pro. It's, you know, and I think it's certainly better than 600,000 square feet of residential. If, and this is a big if, that space it continues to count against the affordable housing requirements. So the way that the affordable housing requirement laws, the inclusionary zoning works, is that you have to do 20% of your floor area for affordable housing. And one thing that they've sought to do is exempt their commercial space floor area from that equation. So essentially they would be reducing the number in the denominator. If it's a fraction is that you have your overall square footage denominator, and then the square footage of affordable is the numerator, and then that gives you your that gives you your fraction.
Right.
So they want to reduce that number so that they have to do less affordable housing square footage. So that is a big issue that I think City Planning Commission is looking at. We're looking at because we don't want them to basically get exempt from doing the affordable housing that they're required to do, you know, by doing more commercial space.
Have you been satisfied with what Willantas has been proposing for affordable housing in comparison to CPC?
Well, no. Even like the numbers have borne out that even if CPC only did 20% instead of the 30% that they promised, but only 20%, then that would be like 500,000 square feet. Now, we were all told that it was going to be 30%. So if 500,000 square feet is 20%, then 30,000, and then 30% would be like 750,000 square feet. And that, so it's actually, the numbers never quite matched up there because it's 600, they always said 660 units. 660 units is probably less than 750,000 square feet. But it's certainly more than 500,000 square feet. So, so right now, their proposal as it is right now has a minimum of like 427,000 square feet for affordable housing. So as it is right now, they are, you know, 73,000 square feet short on affordable housing just from where the minimum was on the CPC proposal. So, and that's just the minimum, that's just the 20%, let alone talking about the 30%. So no, we are kind of, as we are right now, and I've had many conversations with Two Trees, we're not even close.
Okay.
On affordable housing. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about this as to, and I'd like to kind of continue talking about it with you, with all three of you, about what are these pros and cons, and how does it come out on the balance sheet, and so I mean I'm very interested to kind of hear more of what you're thinking.
Ideologically, I'm opposed to the project.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm opposed to the project because of the, you know, not just enclosed within the project. It's whatever its merits are, whatever its attributes are. It's also going to resonate in the area and in history as something that will magnify displacement in the area. It's going to attract a certain kind of zoning or a certain kind of urban design and a certain need to remove the previous population, which I'm opposed to. Otherwise, though, how do I reconcile the desire for progress with keeping the neighborhood? I approached Willantas and asked him if he would be fine with the university being on the site, and he was instantaneous. He said yes. He goes, universities pay rent. That was the first thing he said, going back to your observation about how he's no philanthropist.
That's his words. That's
right?
His words, yeah.
He said universities pay rent. They do. They attract research dollars, and they have an incredible effect on the area. They've also been known as vehicles of gentrification, but I wonder if a University of Civil Engineering and Environmental Science would offset a lot of these problems, because the kind of commercial space that Willantas is seeking in the new Domino is, I don't know, not satisfying to me.
You know, mostly it'll serve the people that do live within there, but I don't get a feeling that it's going to be very inclusionary in any way. And on that, the pro side of that is, meh, good. They'll stay over there in their ivory towers, you know, and I'm okay with that too. You know how I feel. Some of that. And I come from it too with the more, I don't want it built at all, just because I don't want it built. But that's my problem.
I'm sorry.
Right, and honestly, I mean, I don't know, that's one thing to take into account as well, is that one thing that Mr. Willantas has said is that if this rezoning doesn't go through, then he'll just build the old plan.
That's nonsense.
Nobody wants the old plan.
Nobody wants the old plan, but I just think that's
bluffing.
Yeah, I agree. Willantas says a lot of this stuff, but sometimes you have to. This is going to sound really kind of cornball and somewhat mystical, but you have to kind of look through the words and look at the heart of the man. And I look at Williamsburg and I hear a lot of this stuff about, hey, I want to return, and I'm looking at the bottom line. But he cares about his name and history, and he cares about the significance of this project, and it shows. So his return won't necessarily be a monetary one, but it will definitely be a historical one. And if he cares about what he's doing, he's not going to do that nonsense that CPC put together. No way. No. That's
right. So, and in that instance, then does that mean that the project? I mean, because you know what?
I think we should take that threat. No, I think we should take that. What I'm saying is we should take that threat off the table, and we should tell them, like, no, nonsense. Please give us a break. You can no longer use that as a negotiation or to hedge your bets. We want to see, like, so what? Your project is 1,000 times better than the previous project. We want a project that's 1,000 times better than the one you've got now. Do you have a plan, Councilman? Do you have a plan coming out of your office about what you want on that?
I mean, the problem is, the answer is, like, I don't have a plan that I can generate because I don't own the land. You know, that's the thing. It's not.
Come on, Councilman. Come on. You can come up with a plan, and it would have such an influence on. I mean, you're coming out of the 33rd district right now, Councilman. The eyes of the world are on this district. If your office comes up with a plan, people are going to pay attention, whether or not there are no dollars behind this plan. The dollars that you need will come after you kick ass with your plan. I mean, just put it out there. Get some people together.
It's a good point. It's a good point. I wish I could tell you that I had a plan. I do
support a university.
I mean, I'll tell you, the idea that you started and then it's been adopted by some other folks that have, incorporated it, and it's part of and there's been other plans that I've found very compelling as well. I mean, the whole Tate Modern thing as well, I thought was an interesting plan. It's funny though. I mean, I will say that when the idea first came out, the kind of Domino University, I mean, I don't know if I took it honestly as seriously as I probably should have, because look, we've seen now since then, right? Roosevelt Island, right?
I'm gonna jump up off my chair. I mean, I'm gonna.
Carnegie Mellon is now at the Navy Yard.
That's the one that really, more so than the Roosevelt Island, that's the one that really boils my blood. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy. I'm happy they're happening there. But what I mean by my blood boiling is the naysayers. Everywhere going, people saying this couldn't happen and it's not gonna happen. Nobody wants it to happen, and then hearing Carnegie Mellon is opening up. I mean,
that was it. So I mean, but there was I think that was a function of it. This is going back, maybe if we could have gone back 8 years, right, and had the conversation. If we were where we are now 8 years ago, when it was still a manufacturing zone space, because the Navy Yard, in that particular portion, which is owned by Steiner Studios, part of the things that the Navy Yard has it will never become residential. The Navy Yard is going to be in perpetuity just because of the function of it as the Navy. It's an industrial incubation, I mean, more than incubation, it's an industrial space. It's the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so that eliminates the potential profit of residential development. And so in that context, university makes like perfect sense.
Sure.
But I mean, you go to downtown. I mean, I might be driving you crazy here, but go to downtown Brooklyn and what NYU and Poly have done there.
Right. By Metrotech.
By Metrotech, across the street at 370 J Street, they got this CUSP thing. I don't know if you follow the CUSP thing.
I've been down there.
Infometrics, urban infometrics, and all. Problem is when you add and it goes back to that first rezoning in 2010, is that when you add the type of monetary, just create capital out of thin air, that's what we did. That's what you do with the rezoning to residential, because residential is so much more profitable than manufacturing. Is that it creates that money out of thin air. It creates capital out of thin air, and then it becomes hard to essentially put the genie back in the bottle. So, but yes, I mean, I would love to talk more about it.
Would you support a rezoning of the rezoning, so to speak?
Of 2005 rezoning. I would be very interested to see something like that. I think the problem that we face there, and during the campaign it came up many times, is legally how does something like that work? Because we've brought back this idea in that conversation is like, well, we've downzoned parts of the city before. We downzoned 175 blocks of Greenpoint, Williamsburg. We at least contextually zoned it. The issue is that you would need a Department of City Planning to do it, because Greenpoint and Williamsburg was a city-initiated project. It wasn't a private rezoning. It spanned numerous pieces of property, so you would need them to be able to go back and say that they were wrong in 2005, that they had the wrong principles, that the things that caused them to assess whether the density was the right density, the heights were the right heights, that was based on, for some reason, faulty information. And I think what you would probably have happen is the owners they could do a couple things. First, they could just break ground on any of their pieces of property, and that gets them in the ground, and they're grandfathered into the old zone. That's number one. Number two, they could sue and say that it constitutes a taking of their property or assets that was conferred upon them, right? So it was like, well, and then the counter argument that is, well, it was just given, so why can't it be taken away? I'm not quite sure the answer to that, but in talking to some zoning lawyers, I haven't heard like a real compelling way in which you can make it happen. I'm certainly open to talking about it and talking with the administration about it. I live in Greenpoint. I mean, like, I live close to Greenpoint Landing, and I am very acutely aware of what, 40-story towers, 7 40-story towers, something like that, like 2 blocks away from where I live, what it would do. I mean, I walk over to West Street and I'm like, here? Like, this is where, and if you look at the map, honestly, I mean, this goes back to, if you look at the map of the rezoning, it's really, I don't know if they call it the Greenpoint and Williamsburg rezoning, but it really should be called the Greenpoint and Williamsburg rezoning, because there's 80% of the rezoned properties that will see the building are in Greenpoint. You have the Edge and you have Northside Piers in Williamsburg, and then you have the big park at Bushwick Inlet eventually, or whatever. I mean, hopefully, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time in office trying to get that as much.
Sounds like another episode.
Right.
Bushwick Inlet by itself.
But then after that, you've got 6 or 7 properties. You got the B&H site. You've got the Gutman site, Greenpoint Terminal Market. You've got property owned by a woman named Miriam Chan. You have property owned by a guy named John Bernstein. Another property owned by Miriam Chan. I think I'm leaving one out.
Chapman parcel.
Right, Chapman parcel, and then Greenpoint Landing, and then 77 Commercial, which is a somewhat different animal, but I mean, all of that is in Greenpoint. So all of that density, all of that development is really Greenpoint development.
Sooner or later, it's not going to be talk. Wonders, like sometimes if you walk down the street and you read the news and you look at what's going on in the neighborhood and there's signs everywhere, you just get the feeling like it's certainly not like 10 years ago, you know. And I don't mean like getting caught in this trap of the before, but in the sense that like people are smarter and it's making them angrier. There's some frustration right now. I think like some people are kind of laying in bed going, what are we gonna do? Fuck, you know. There's some inactivity, but I think it's only a matter of time.
Hopefully the lessons learned will be carried on to the next fighters. I mean,
And we need to fight against that feeling of, oh shit, there's nothing we can do anyway, so let's just lay down and take it.
For real, you gotta go Alexander the Great on people. You gotta on the council, you know.
come on, Steve.
You know.
Alexander the Great.
33rd district, you know, for real.
And well, there's going to be also, we have a new mayor, we have a new council, we have a new speaker, we've got new leadership in the council.
President.
Let's see how things evolve in the next year. I mean, I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
I agree.
Great, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Bittersweet, Brooklyn.